My name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the battle of ideas.
I feel obliged to give long-form answers, Jeremy, because the subjects that you and I discuss are very much bigger than people think that they are. I heard some Americans talking about South Africa the other day, and their understanding of what's going on here is so simplistic. If I simplified things, I'd leave myself open to a lot of criticism. So I try to bring the receipts and build the whole case for the audience so they know that I'm not bull dusting. You know, if I talk about farm murders, I talk about farm murders with facts, figures, data, and statistics, so that nobody can say to me it's not true. You know, they would have to come with a ton of non-existent statistics to even make a case. So, yeah, we discuss subjects that sort of invite a comprehensive address.
You and I have been chatting for many years now, but I don't think, Simon, you've ever actually explained to my UK column audience, particularly, what Suidlanders is.
Many years ago, our leader and founder believed that many of the central premises of the new South Africa proposition were false. That it was too much of a dollied up story to be real. And he was trained in the army in intelligence. So he is able to interrogate a subject intellectually. Does this sound true? Does that, you know, is this likely? Is it probable? And he arrived at the conclusion that sooner or later, South Africa was going to meet with a far more harsh reality than the sweetheart Mary Poppins reality of the transition from apartheid through the elections on the 27th of April 1994, first multiracial elections in South Africa, general elections that were won by the ANC. And he then became familiar with the prophecies of an obscure character, to most people obscure, from about 100 and odd years ago. He was born in 1862, died in 1926. So he lived to be 64. And those prophecies are very, very, very reliable. Whether you're an atheist watching this or a Buddhist, what have you, doesn't matter. Maybe it was sheer luck. But the fact remains that he was extraordinarily accurate. And he was involved in the Boer War as a non-combatant. For religious reasons, he didn't carry a rifle, but he was at the front lines. He felt it was his duty. And many generals attested to the supernatural nature of his prophecies. You know, they weren't predictions, they were supernatural. It's things that he could never possibly have known and which were enormously improbable. And there's a long list, laundry list, 800 and something, I believe, all told. One of the series of prophecies pertained to the new South Africa. He said, bearing in mind 100 years ago, nobody ever believed that any African country should be allowed to rule itself. That was the prevailing wisdom of all of the developed world. So he said that South Africa, of all countries, in other words, the African country with the highest percentage of European people, would one day be ruled by a black man. One day a black man will sit on the throne of South Africa, and he will be deemed a saint by the world. And when he dies, people will come from all over the world to pay homage to him. And he'll be in a glass coffin in Pretoria, etc., etc. With that in mind, our leader and founder, his name is Mr. Gustav Müller, sought to found an organization based upon Christian, conservative, Caucasian principles. We're an overtly Christian organization. We don't do church services and things like that, but we are overtly Christian. We're an emergency plan initiative. We're defined under law as a civil defense organization. Our raison d'etre, our purpose for existence, is to execute a national emergency plan to safeguard the welfare of our members in the event of cataclysmic events in South Africa. So he sought to set up something like that. It's not martial, it's not about, whatever silly things inviting trouble. It's about ordinary families in South Africa that share those three values. They are Caucasian people, Caucasian values, Caucasian norms, European, if you like, conservative and Christian. And yeah, I think that's the gist of the story, to answer your question and not to be too long-winded. That's who and what we are, and that's how we came to be.
Now, obviously, on hearing that, a knee-jerk response could be, yeah, but that sounds a bit racist.
Yeah, I'm sure it does sound racist, but it's never racist when no white person can now or ever could buy property in the Kingdom of KwaZulu or in any of the 9 Xhosa sub-kingdoms or in Bophuthatswana. Or it's not racist when you have the Black Accountants Society. You know, it's a silly argument. It's a we're over it argument. Or that's how we see it. You know, it kind of worked for a time, but then it became patently hypocritical. When South Africans were being persuaded by the media and by the rest of the world that they should accept and not resist the new South Africa Rainbow Nation, nobody ever said, oh, and by the way, there is going to be reverse racism because there's a lot of catching up to do. They said it's going to be equal. Everybody will have equal opportunity, equal. And then you have things like our astonishing black economic empowerment laws, which make it, I mean, it's a whole subject on its own. And you have things like white people aren't allowed in organization, but black people are. Black people can have, you know, Zulu organizations, you name it. There's devoted to their tribe, to their village, exclusive of any race, any other tribe. And we were told, what was the slogan in the 1980s, the late 80s? The chief slogan used by the anti-apartheid movement was non-racialism, non-tribalism, non-sexism. And now there are overt organizations that represent certain tribes only. So, you know, people can say whatever they like. Really, it's just now patently asinine to make that argument.
Yeah, you said reverse racism, and a lot of academics and media types poo-poo that. But yeah, anybody can go to racelaw.co.za. I have it open in front of me, and here's what it says on the front page. South Africa's legal system is one of only a handful around the world that treats legal subjects differently based on their perceived race or skin color. This has been the case for centuries, but most of the world assumes it came to an end in the 1990s. And this is not the case. Racelaw.co.za is a public interest initiative to index all the statuses, regulations, policies, and superior court judgments that perpetuate racialism as a matter of law. Listen to this. 324 racial acts of parliament have been adopted since 1910. 122 of those racial acts of parliament have been adopted since 1994. And 145 racial acts of parliament are operational today in the year 2026.
You see? Yeah, it's silly, Jeremy. You know, in-group stuff is vital to everybody. But white people have been bullied out of thinking like that. In-group is fine for me, but not for thee. And we're just an organization that says, under international law, chiefly, but not only, the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions, provision is made for identifiable ethnic groups to act in a lawful manner in their best interests in anticipation of war. That's explicit. Anybody can look that up. Anybody can find the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions and read through them. I think Protocol 3 is almost totally irrelevant to such an exercise, but the early portions of Protocols 1 and 2 express this explicitly. So all that our boss, our leader and founder, Mr. Gustav Miller, did was he said, we're going to do a legal, decent, respectable thing. We're not going to injure, we're not going to maim, we're not going to rob, we're not going to rape, of which there is so much in this country. Highest rape statistics in the world. 6 of the top most dangerous cities in the world are South African. 4 of the top 10. 6 of the top 20 and 4 of the top 10. We have nothing to be ashamed of. No Suidlander has ever been convicted of a murder or a rape or a whatever. We're decent, ordinary, plain, respectable people who are under international law, simply working to the prejudice of nobody to safeguard the welfare of our people in the event of a cataclysm in this country. And what's more, it should be noted, I know, your more politically correct viewers will struggle with this one, but if you live in a certain society, you understand it far better than the experts in the Northern Hemisphere. And as somebody who lives in this society, I know that if there's a cataclysm in this country of one description or another, there will be a fracturing on along racial lines, and it won't be a purely white thing. It won't be the whites saying, let's gather together as a tiny minority and beat up all the blacks. We don't have control of the army. We don't have control of the police. We're about 4.5 million people of an official population of 60 million that is generally regarded to be around about the 80 million mark by statisticians. You know the story. Every time we have a census in South Africa, some very learned man writes into the newspaper exposing the stats as silly. 4.5 million of 80 million or 70 million or 60 million, the fracturing along racial lines will be driven mostly by black people. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it is what has happened since forever. We live in an age where doctrine is regarded as having greater value than practical reality. I can distort reality with doctrine. So although I've never menstruated and the glands in my breasts are not sufficiently developed for me to lactate, and though I have no cervix and no womb and no birth canal, those things that I've just mentioned are the defining characteristics of a woman. And they are determined by two X chromosomes. And although I don't have two X chromosomes, at the root of every cell in my body, I am not a woman. Yet I can say that I am. And so we live in a time when people can say that everybody can get along and it'll be delightful. But very seldom in history has that worked well for any sustained period. There are exceptions, but the exceptions prove the rule. When you point to Rome or Persia as two notable exceptions of places that incorporated the peoples around them in an accommodating manner, you stop there. You don't then go on to point out, I heard that the Aborigines were very, very accepting of because nobody has a third example. It's always Rome and Persia. The reality is that I have guests here. I've had many people come to visit me over the past few months to ask advice on the satanic timeline for the ending of the world, which, as I described to you some time back, there's about a 7-month window that began last Tuesday, the 17th of February anyway. And in the occult, they believe that humanity must be destroyed now. And a key date is the 2nd and 3rd of March. Very, very key. My point being that throughout history, when cataclysms have occurred, you run first to your mommy and your daddy and your brothers and your sister and your cousins. You run to people of the same church and faith and traditions and culture. It's the way that human beings are built. You can argue all you like against it, but you know, Jeremy, this becomes an uncomfortable subject, but I'm going to say it. You don't have to be especially bright upon discovering that 88% of our DNA is devoted to our brains to realize that mathematically that means that brains are very, 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 very much more different than skin and hair and teeth and whatever. When we are threatened, we always will, and it will never change, seek out those who are closest to us, brain-wise. Yeah, and everything that flows out of the brain. I'm not talking about whether you can do mental, calculus in your head or something like that, trigonometry, without a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm talking about everything that flows out of our brains. We have in South Africa weaver birds, and there's a huge variety of them, and they all build their nests differently, but according to species, they all build them identically. It comes from within. It's not an artifact. My culture, my religion, my everything came from within the body corporate of those most like me. And there is some variety between, let's say, Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, but for the most part, they're practically identical when viewed from the perspective of a Hindu or an animist, somebody who believes that there's a spirit in a tree or whatever, or an atavist, somebody who believes in ancestor worship. The divisions between us are enormous, and they come from within. That's how it works. In science, they don't talk like modern human beings do. In science, they know, in zoology and botany, for example, they know that it comes from within. It's not imposed. My behavior, my culture, my traditions, my ways, in ancient Rome, they had an expression that was meant to cover everything. Norms, mores, and values. So what are my norms? You're in Rome, you want to know how to behave. Well, as a norm, we don't walk around naked. Oh, okay, make a note of that. As a norm, we don't pinch other men's wives' bottoms. Oh, jolly good, better watch out for that. As a norm, we have 3 meals a day. And so on. What are our mores? What do we believe is right and what is wrong? I should have used the illustration of the other man's wife in the mores category. And what is right and wrong? Okay, everybody understands that. And values, what do we cherish? In the West, we cherish, I'm going to use some examples. People may have better ones that come to their minds. Perhaps ballet, perhaps art, perhaps the building of cathedrals and churches. So much so that the flying buttresses of Rouen Cathedral and similar places have never been replicated. They are the high point and the pinnacle of architecture. Clearly, somebody thought that it was a very good idea to invest the then equivalent of trillions of dollars into flying buttresses, because it's damn difficult. We cherish that. We cherish the idea of formal education so that everybody has an identical basic knowledge of how the world functions, and not just throwing the baby in the deep end of the swimming pool and watching some sink and some swim. That's how it works, really how it works. And those people who doubt me should just be a little bit patient, because given what's going on in bond markets and stock markets, I'll illustrate with one point. Sorry to be so long-winded, but if you're not sure, if you watch MSNBC and then you hear me talk and you think, golly gee, I wonder who's right, I'll settle the argument once and for all. In 1929, when the stock market crashed, the crash was prompted by the recognition of a bubble, and people therefore withdrawing their money from the market. The bubble, we don't have all the information that we would like to have, was an average price to earnings ratio of an American stock of between 12 and 15. As I say, we can't be certain. So across all of the stocks traded on the stock markets in the United States of America, price to earnings ratio means that it takes a certain amount of time when you get dividends. So I invest in Jeremy's company. He says to me, Simon, I promise you I'm going to give you half the profits every year and you'll never regret it. And I discover that those profits are 5,000 Rand a year. But I put in R1 million or £1 million or $1 million. It's going to take me how many years to get my money back? And I start to think, sheepers, I'm not going to fall for that again. So people were buying stocks for a certain amount of money, and on average, it took them 12 to 15 years to get their original capital back in the form of the yearly dividend payment. And they perceived that that was absurd. And so the clever guys got out of the market. Right now, the price to earnings ratio across all US stock markets is 26. Let that sink in. But if you use a more nuanced way of measuring price to earnings, if you extend it a little bit, if you don't just say, well, Jeremy gave me a great payout last year, golly gee, this is going to go on forever and ever and ever. If you measure it using the Cape-Shiller index, or the Cape-Shiller, I'm forgetting the word, then you measure over a 10-year trailing period. So Jeremy says, oh, Sam, I promise you this thing is going to work. I've been doing it for 10 years and it's worked, but I need a cash injection. You're the man for me, man. And I look at the books. If I use the Cape-Shiller and I see what profits he's made over 10 years to assess whether he's as good as his word and this endeavor of his is profitable and is worth me investing in, you will discover using the Cape-Shiller that right now the US stock markets are at a price to earnings ratio of 41. And the Tesla, I haven't looked for a few weeks, but I believe it was four Fridays ago. I looked, and it was 400.01. That means that the level of mental retardation has risen right to the top. That I sincerely believe that it's worth waiting 400 years to get my money back. That's how insane global financial markets are at the moment. So I'm saying to the person who listens to this podcast, you can bet your very bottom dollar that within this year, we're going to see a financial cataclysm, the likes of which the world has never seen. Therefore, within this year, you are going to be able to assess for yourself whether I am 100% right all of the time. Exceptions aside, there are always exceptions. But the exceptions are so few that they prove the rule. Therefore, for practical intents and purposes, I am 100% right all of the time when I make the proposition that everybody always reverts to type when reality bites. It's only during periods of excessive wealth and the breaking of the morals of a society, and when the intelligentsia has so much influence over society that they can propose to that society things which are patently nonsensical. So for now, you've got the upper hand. You're living wherever in the world, in San Francisco, and it's too good for words. Let's talk again in 7 months' time. And then you tell me, by dint of direct observation, what did you see occur when that thing burst? When it all came crumbling down, as it's about to do, because many people don't even live to be 400 years, much less have an adult lifespan of 400 years to collect the original investment in Tesla back. You are going to see it happen before your very eyes. It's as simple as that. Everybody will be in group. Everybody, with no exceptions, in a very short span of time.
I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with in-group preference. Jews have made a great success of in-group preference. I have an in-group preference for my family. I will put my family before other families. Does it mean that I hate other families, Simon? No, of course not.
Exactly. Yeah, I say to people, where have you ever heard of a guy paying his next-door neighbour's children's school fees? There may be some exceptions here and there. We've all helped unfortunate children. But by and large, these wonderful idealistic concepts exist only as long as it doesn't cost you. As long as it makes you look virtuous and so on, and it only takes such a marginal amount of your wealth that it scarcely counts. But when it really counts, all of the most politically correct people in all of the world suddenly abandon these values. It's all about them and their family, and they put up a wall between them and their neighbor, and they try not to look over it, and they hope that their neighbor never looks over either. It's nonsense, Jeremy. It astonishes me that anybody can fall for this way of thinking. You know, it's like when you see the immigrants into Britain. How anybody ever thought that was a good idea is beyond me. I will never understand how anybody was that stupid. There was only one possible ending.
Something that you and I can relate to is, of course, 1994 in South Africa and what happened in the 80s and how South Africa changed. People around the world, unless they lived here, will never really understand.
South Africa was established as a trading colony, or as a trading post in 1652 for the Dutch East India Company. Move forward a couple of hundred years, and those first European settlers have gone into the interior, and they've developed various things. They discovered diamonds and gold, and all of a sudden the British Empire takes a very strong interest in South Africa. The largest, greatest lode of gold ever known to mankind. British Empire comes along, conquers the indigenous white South Africans, the Boers, and takes over South Africa from the year 1902, if you like, ish, through 1910, which is a key year, the establishment of the Union of South Africa by Great Britain, all the way through to 1961. So in all of that period, South Africa either didn't have a central government or it was ruled by Britain. Britain lets go of the colony, and we have...
Hang on. There were, I think, 2 Boer states.
Yes, there were, but there wasn't a central South African state. So... the people that imposed apartheid, the laws, the central laws, unquestionably is simply nobody but Great Britain. Come 1961, that's the inherited system. Great Britain leaves. We become an independent republic. And for 33 years, there was a thing called apartheid. And that apartheid was based on the laws imposed by Great Britain, largely to do with labor and poll taxes and what have you. prior to that, there wasn't formal separation of races. There was effective separation of races. The white people came along and they said, "Oh, we've got to teach our kids to read. Our kids, that's what we do. My kid must read. Whatever you're doing in your tribe has got nothing whatsoever to do with me." So there was, in a practical sense, separation, but it was never at all legal until the British said, "We've got to make this thing formal, and we've got to find a way to drive African labour from KwaZulu-Natal, one of the provinces, and the Eastern Cape particularly, but not only, onto the gold mines," because the British, when they won the Boer War, took those gold mines for themselves, 7 Jewish families, roughly speaking, which was obviously the key driver of the war. That entire war was about one thing and one thing only, and that was giving possession, because it wasn't advantageous to the British, wasn't advantageous to the black people of South Africa, and wasn't advantageous to the Boers, who had set up a republic which happened, they didn't know in advance, obviously, to be sitting on the greatest load of gold of history. So the only people who benefited from the Boer War were those families. No other party participant to it benefited. Come 1994, the first multiracial elections after 33 years of apartheid, and the African National Congress wins, and all the laws are changed. No separate schools, no separation of schooling by race. But the many black economic empowerment laws were brought in. In other words, you must have a super preponderance of black people working in your company. And there must be a super preponderance of black suppliers who supply to you.
What happened post-94 was very, very strange because it was marketed as the Rainbow Nation. Now, that has been a complete failure of multiculturalism.
Yeah. No, it doesn't work. It's like hip hop and rap music in the USA. I'm not saying it's bad, but clearly black people in the USA, for reasons known best to them, headed off in different musical directions, including jazz and blues and so on. And some of it's fantastic. I'm crazy about blues. It's resonant to me. But generally speaking, it doesn't come out of my culture. And to them, it's the ideal. It has huge following, whereas you don't get overwhelming numbers of white people singing the blues in the cotton fields. You know, it's not. So the Rainbow Nation idea was cute, but I want to braai with, that is to say barbecue, with people who speak my language. I'm not against braaiing with black people. Let me give you an example. Classic example. Over recent years, there have been tremendous efforts to give land to black people to be farmed. And those efforts have been a terrific failure. But here in the Eastern Cape, there are some exceptions. We recently held an open day that involved horse riding. There were 167 competitors. Not one black person attended. Were we offended? Were we hurt? Or was there a big drama? Did we write secret messages to one another saying, look how racist the blacks are? No, it was, Western mounted games. We kind of knew who wanted to participate in advance. We could have predicted it. If black farmers get together to celebrate a key holiday in their religion, so in ancestor worship, as they do at key times of the year, the chances of a white farmer arriving are exactly zero. I've never even heard of it. So the idea that we were all just going to blend in and adopt, you can take 6/8 of my culture and I'll take 7/13 of yours and it's going to be delightful, was always daft. It was never predicated on the instinctive tendencies or inclinations or preferences that come from within us that make weaver birds almost identical to one another. But the marginal differences between them cause them to build their nests in absolutely different ways. The most curious ways: some are entered from underneath. Others are huge, big colonies where thousands of birds share one nest, and each bird or each mating pair has its own sort of secret entrance. Tiny, minuscule differences in the species change behavior completely. And anybody who knows anything about animals, all the farmers watching this, will just be sort of sitting there unremarking, because it's known to science. It's only not known to the super intellectualized of modern Western society.
Civil war that might or might not arrive in the future, people will align with those who are most like them. And that is why Suidlanders exists. It exists as an organization to bring together a particular group of people who might want to find themselves aligning with one another in that unlikely event.
It's never worked any other way in all of human history. When things get tough, you revert to type. You abandon all of the ornaments that have no utilitarian value of yourself, whether it be clothes or whatever the case may be. Just scrolling on TikTok. And you resort to the things that really count, and you do it in the most effective way. If I have to negotiate with you, Jeremy, let's say you and I were in a life and death situation, and we had to find common ground over what prayers we were going to say and to whom we were going to say them. You know, in desperation. Now, panic stations, hey, maybe we should call upon the Lord, or what book we're going to read for him to grant it, to glean wisdom. It doesn't work that way. I run to Jeremy because I know that 99.999% of what we are is absolutely identical. Language, origin, body strength, muscle explosiveness, IQ, tolerance for heat or cold or whatever the case may be. The differences between Jeremy and me are so little that it enables me to at once gain an ally and share the burden of risk.
Okay, so then that also means, by extension, that it's not just a website or a group. I mean, there's actually a strategy.
Yeah, as I said to you earlier, I've got some guests visiting, and we were chatting about something. There's a concept that I've described many times. When I was a youngster, my chief sport was life-saving. Lifeguarding, same thing. But you can do it as a sport all around the world. And I grew up at a beach that was world famous for, at the 1974 World Life-Saving Championships, the Australians and the Americans refused to participate at that beach. They said it had to be moved. They said whoever thought that this was a safe beach for bathing needs their head read. People are going to die. This is one of the most dangerous beaches in the world. Simultaneously, it had the record for the greatest number of shark attacks of any beach in the world at that time. So I grew up on a beach as a lifesaver, as a champion lifesaver, in very, very dangerous conditions. And sometimes we'd swim out very far to the shark nets, which are staggered like this. There's no other way to make them work. So the idea is that the sharks come in, and they're with the bathers, but they sense that they're trapped. Because to them, it looks like they're trapped. So they swim as fast as they can outward, and they get caught by the gills in the nets. And every Monday, the anti-shark measures board comes along and pulls up the nets, pulls out the dead sharks and takes them away. if you swim out to the nets, it's very, 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 very dangerous. I did it on a number of occasions with my friends, and on every occasion, some clever dick, smart Alec would say, as he's getting nervous, 15-year-old boy, knowing that he's being very reckless, would say, I don't have to be the best swimmer here today, I only have to be the second slowest, if we see a fin. My point being that to go from, this is what I was discussing with my guests, to go from indefensible to defensible is not a matter of getting a Cobra helicopter gunship. You don't have to have a machine gun to go from being very, very, very vulnerable to exceedingly less vulnerable. You only have to make minimal efforts. And our mentality is that if we provide basics, we don't have $1 trillion to buy everybody. Let's say we get 100,000 refugees. So that's 100 million rand in our money just on sleeping bags. About 1,000 rand a sleeping bag, whatever that translates to in pounds. Call it 50 pounds, however many dollars, roughly speaking, just as a rule of thumb. We are never going to be able to conduct our national emergency plan in that manner. So we say, we're going to build a house, everybody bring one brick, and we'll be okay. Because we won't be perfectly defensible, but the shark goes for the slowest swimmer. It goes for what's closest to him. The first people in any conflict to suffer are people who don't have groups around them. The head, the founder of Shit Hits the Fan School, Jeko, famous guru in the world of preppers. He lived through a year-long siege in Bosnia-Herzegovina as part of a small group of Croats that was trapped during the breakup of Yugoslavia. So for 1 year, no electricity, no running water, no food. And he took what he learned then to the USA and made a lot of money, and famously said, when I go dark, you know that the USA is about to go terminal. He said, I will know when it is. And he went dark sometime last year, I was told. It just went dark. Shut down the website, so I was told, and can't be found. Anyway, point being that he says he has a fantastic course, or used to have, in which he maps what are the first things. Don't be alone. The vulnerability of an old lady versus the vulnerability of 3 heavy smokers is as far as the East is from the West. It's not that you have to be Jackie Chan and that you have to have a machine gun. As long as you've got 10 people around you who are moderately defensible, the jackals and the hyenas of this world will go for the little old lady every single time. So the idea of Suidlanders is we don't have to have the world's perfect plan. We just have to gather together as far as possible in one place and endeavor to remove ourselves from the conflict. If other people want a civil war, they're welcome to it. We don't. And together we will get by. We just have to fill in the blanks of the basic tenets of survivability according to real life in the real world. So we have a national emergency plan to come together, to support one another, to grow crops, to purify water, generate electricity. Young men provide a border, or stabilize a border, or protect a border, defend a border. That's the long and the short of it, Jeremy.
Yeah, that's what I love about what you just said, though. And even if that kind of thing doesn't play out, the process of learning is still very valuable.
Yeah, very. I don't know that I'm going to make it. I believe in the prophecies of Sina van Rensburg, and he said that in the January, February, March period, he used very specific words, the yellow peach rains. The yellow peach rains in South Africa fall between the first week of January, first week of March. Last week of January, first week of March, he said a cataclysm breaks out in the world. He said after that, this prophet guy to whom I alluded earlier, he said after that, in about September or October, again, he did it by signs and seasons and how green the grass is and how cold the winter is. So we know that he was referring to sometime between September and October-ish. He said that fire that rages across the world will come to South Africa. I might be one of the people who dies. That's real life in the real world. People died in the English Civil War. Nobody asked them, how do you feel about this? Oh, sorry, man. In World War I, World War II, people were incinerated by the Americans wholesale in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War. In Iraq, the generally accepted figure on both sides of the aisle of the number of innocent civilians that died during the American occupation is 1 million or more, not less. That's real life in the real world. The real life and the real world that we modern people have been insulated from since forever, providing us the luxury of being able to overindulge in drinking. And here I point the finger at me, not at you all, to overindulge in food, overindulge in smoking and not being healthy, and this and that bad behavior with women that we all know what life in the modern world has allowed us to do. And to pretend that I'm a woman, though I've never once menstruated, not even once. I could squeeze my chest for a month of Sundays. I wouldn't be able to sustain an infant on it, and the rest. But it's completely delusional, is my point. But in what the time that we believe is emerging before our very eyes, it's not going to be a case of, can I guarantee my survival in such circumstances? Who could get, aeroplane comes over and drops a napalm bomb on my Vietnamese village. But if all the villages of Vietnam, or many of them, certain villages in Vietnam, had spent 20 or 25 years learning and practicing and rehearsing and meditating on improving their chances of survival, then there would have been a disproportionately high survival rate among, let's say, Hmong people, the Hmong people of Cambodia. There would have been a disproportionately high survival rate if all of the Hmong people had been doing that. So we're not guaranteeing anybody anything. It's war, for goodness sake, man. What do you think? But we are saying, if you make a little bit of effort, you will improve your chances of not suffering grievously should such terrible events transpire than if you didn't. And sorry, Jeremy, to hog the microphone. I want to make a brief last comment. I'm very close. I have 3 sons. And people remark on it all the time. Jeepers, I've never seen a father that's so close to his sons. One's 25, one's 23, and one is 16. And we maintain a very, 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 very close relationship. I, more than anybody else, am terrified that Donald Trump is going to start World War III on the 2nd of March, as per this occultic date, and that my sons' lives are going to be ruined forever. So please, if there's anybody watching this who has the idea that Simon just can't wait to shoot black people, he's just dying for it all to go down in South Africa and for families and children and everybody to die, you've got rocks in your head. I think I felt as if I had to say that because some people really are dumb.
I get it, but that's because I'm South African. But something I was thinking about, Simon, is you look at China, right? It's got a super majority of Han people, about over 90%, I think, right? Yeah. It's in many ways monocultural.
Yes.
And nobody accuses them of being racist for wanting to keep it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I watch Lay's Real Talk. I find it fascinating to get an insight into China, and she's talking at the moment about the Xi Jinping's assassination of these two top generals who were opposing him going to war with Taiwan. So they were this kind of last obstacle, and all these dramas going on at the moment at the highest levels in China. And I've watched so many hours of Lei talk about these things that I understand exactly what you're saying. You know, I've never been to China. I had my bestest, longest friend, I always say to people, lives in China. And he's married to a Chinese, and we haven't seen each other for about 20 years, but he's for sure. I mean, we keep in touch, and I adore him. So I know a little bit about China, but not much. And I've learned a lot from Lei. And one thing is clear, boy. It's my way or the highway. Let's say the Uyghur people. I don't want to jump on that Uyghur train. You know, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to stir trouble. It's just the first ethnic name from China that comes to mind. We are predominant. You play by our rules, and that's the end of it. The Uyghurs maintain their religion and, I suppose, cultural things, and they do things their way. They toe the party line of the established culture that is imposed by the Han people. But nobody accuses one another of being racist, or it's, you have your way, I have my way. Where I call the shots, I will call the shots. Where you have a preponderance of people, you're doubtless going to build mosques, and you're doubtless going to talk a dialect that offends me, but which is your dialect and which is precious to you, and you're doubtless going to make your women do that thing. And yeah, that's the way it is. I don't think you're being a racist, and I don't feel like I'm being a racist either. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm not even endeavoring to proselytize anymore. If the Americans wish to commit cultural suicide, and Europe clearly wishes to do so, well, so be it. I'm now at that point where it's just about me and my small group. It's, you know, I was telling somebody earlier, the three best things you can do as a prepper or survivalist, by far the three, are watch the documentary on YouTube. There are two. The one is much inferior, the other is much superior. The long form, I think it's 2 hours 43 minutes, a documentary on YouTube about the worst year in human history, the year 536 AD, and the 19 years after it, when almost all of mankind nearly died, or did die. Read the book Patriots by James Wesley Rawls, and do the now no longer existing shithitsthefanschool.com JACO course, in which he makes it clear you don't have to go into a civil war with mortars and bazookas and what have you. All you have to begin with, first steps, is have a team around you that's loyal to you. Don't be an individual, particularly if you're old. Don't be isolated. And go to a place that gives you favor. Because when you and your team are holed up in that space, people will, like an animal, he uses the example, he says, we've all watched those National Geographic videos in his thick Balkan accent, in which we can't understand why the mountain lion it would have killed the dog. Why didn't it go for the dog? Because the mountain lion has to get through winter, and it knows that it probably won't if it's got a broken leg. The dog has no chance against the mountain lion, but it will injure the mountain lion. And that's why predators usually go for very much weaker prey. They don't go for prey that is just one echelon beneath them. They go 3 echelons down. And I've lost my train of thought now, but my point being that if you just do the basics, if you just observe and recognize the basics of human survival, how people got through the worst year in history, who survived in Bosnia and Yugoslavia when it broke up and who died. If you just follow the basics, if you bit of common sense, people won't attack your house, not because you're super duper duper super defensible. It's because you're not the weakest. A gang of armed marauders who could easily beat you doesn't want to suffer a meat cleaver to the forehead. You know? They know they'll win like the mountain lion and the dog, but they know that they'll take wounds that they'll regret. So they always go for the weakest. And I forgot where we started there, and I apologize to you, Jeremy, but somehow I thought that was relevant. I think I've messed it up a bit.
I just realized that we went through this entire discussion saying Suidlanders, but without explaining what it means. It's an Afrikaans word. I know we've had to explain this many times, but you can always explain it again.
Yeah, people might translate it as Southerners. In colloquial English, that's the word that we would use. But it's a translation that doesn't do justice to the Afrikaans language, particularly certain terms used in the Bible. And therefore, the better translation is Southlanders, the people of the Southland. And we are the Europeans who occupy the southern tip of Africa.
Yeah, I mean, the word Suidlanders, I think, just sounds better than saying Southlanders. It's just a nicer, it just flows off the tongue better.
Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, as we come in for a landing, Simon, I was actually looking for a better metaphor there. Landing, as we come in for a better, help me out here with one that's relatable to our conversation. As we come in for the exit. The moral of the story is what?
The moral of the story is that people can say and think and believe whatever they like. Cow walks on four legs. Men have certain characteristics, women have other characteristics. And in times of critical danger, people always seek out those with whom they have the most in common. And as we in the Western world begin to explore a general cataclysm, you know, the invasion of Europe, the stock market madness, all of these things, as this boil or pimple comes to an inevitable head, which everybody can see happening, and you're daft if you can't see that. What I've just said is going to be proven right over and over and over again. And the best thing that people can do is not attempt the impossible. That is to say, don't think, oh, gosh, I think there might be a civil war in Britain one day. I need an atomic bomb. If you want to survive, you just need a bunch of mates, a bit of a plan, a destination to head for. You need to be just a little bit defensible than the next guy. You can buy lasers that are extremely powerful. One guy burned up, got heavy boots. And he switched it on and he immediately burned a hole through the boots. He was trying to prove a point. You can buy torches nowadays that can blind people. Pepper spray. I've been pepper sprayed twice in my life. And let me tell you, it's very much worse than you might think. It's completely debilitating. Buy yourself a bow and arrow, buy a sling, buy a catapult, go to a safe place, have a plan, get some extra fuel. The moral of the story is that trouble is coming, and whether you like it or not, you're going to find yourself depending upon those who are closest to you, kith and kin. You might as well start now, and don't panic about not having some foolproof plan. You don't need to be the fastest swimmer in the world. You only need to be not the slowest. And the moment you make that much effort, the moment you do that much, you already move. Let's say there are 100 echelons of preparedness. You're a male in your 40s and you're fairly healthy, so you would like to believe that you're not in the lowest echelon, you're in echelon number 30. To go from 30 to 70 or 80 is the easiest thing in the world. To get to 100, yes, you need a Cobra helicopter gunship and you need nukes and all of that kind of stuff. But to get yourself out of danger, very far removed from the shark, is easy peasy. It's 100 liters of fuel. It's some pepper spray. It's a location that is a little bit more remote. It's a clean water source. It's some food, and it's 10 buddies, each armed with a catapult. Yes, that's ridiculous against a nuclear bomb, but most people never ever, it's not how wars are fought. In no war in history has 100% of the people died. It's usually between 10 and 20% of the combatants. So it's a small fraction. In order for you to elevate yourself out of the most vulnerable, that small fraction, exceptions aside, some of the best prepared people will also die, but generally it's the most vulnerable. For you to get from here to here, easy. Easiest thing in the world. Do it. Do it like we're doing it here in South Africa. Suidlanders.
And the website is?
Suidlanders.org. No, you just type Suidlanders.org. There you see the spelling. SUIDLANDERS.org. That's our English language website.
All right. Simon Roche, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Oh, thank you very much for having Suidlanders, Jeremy. We always appreciate it.